We are just less than a month shy of 1 year of being on strike. It's just too much for people to handle. This is a quick money saver,
Hmm.
but they're not giving you all the details. Your post office is in jeopardy now. We need Canadians to speak up. So we're still on strike. Nothing's been resolved.
Welcome back to the Citizenship Show. My name is Clinton. We have Shane Lorenz in studio again. This is another Canada Post video. It's turning into a theme on this channel, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. But again, so Shane is a representative, a union rep with the CUPW, the Canadian Union for Postal Workers here on Vancouver Island. Shane, thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you so much for having me, Clinton.
So let's just wind the clock back. We initially met in December of last year when Canada Post went on strike initially. Since then, there have been three separate job actions, or kind of three chapters to this story. Can you for people who haven't seen the previous episodes, can we kind of just set the timeline of events here?
Yeah, so originally we went on strike on November 15th of last year, and we were ordered back to work under Section 107 December 17th. But the problem with that was that we weren't given binding arbitration, which is normally what happens when people get legislated or forced back to work. They go back to work, they assume their old contracts, it goes to an arbitrator, the arbitrator makes a new collective agreement, and it's just imposed. There's no voting or anything like that. The problem is when we were ordered back to work, we weren't given binding arbitration. We were given an industrial inquiry commission with Commissioner Kaplan overseeing that, and that went until almost the end of May. And he came out with a report that was just sort of recommendations
Hmm.
on what the government should do with Canada Post. The problem with the commission, from the union's perspective, was it really didn't. It was really just the union on one side of the room and the corporation on the other. But this is a public service, and we think that every Canadian should have had a say in what should happen to the post office, and that didn't happen. So
Mm.
Canada Post gave us a final offer shortly after that. We were ordered to vote on it, even though the union flat out rejected it.
Mm.
The membership went to a vote through through the CIRB, and we voted no. 70% vote no for both segments. And then the minister told both sides to come. So we put in a counter offer. Corporation came with another global offer. And the second offer was worse than the first one. It was the same offer with even more rollbacks.
Mm.
So now we're sort of in this area of limbo where the union feels like they're negotiating by themselves because the corporation is refusing to come to the table with a real offer, playing hard on the fact that they're painting this picture that we're in a crisis scenario where we're losing so much money we can't move forward without all these cutbacks and rollbacks. But to complicate matters even more, the minister responsible for Canada Post stepped in on September 25th and made some sweeping proposal changes to the
Mm.
post office that had nothing to do with negotiations themselves. And the three changes are eliminating door to door delivery, lifting the moratorium on rural post office closures, and changing the delivery parameters for letter mail, meaning to save costs, they're now going to use exclusively truck travel and no longer air travel. So, what maybe used to be a 3-day delivery span for a letter might suddenly become 6 or 8, or depending on what kind of area we're talking about. It's changing the service without consulting anybody. No small businesses, no Canadians, no consumers, no communities. Nobody was consulted. These decisions were just made by the Liberal government, and we're quite annoyed about that. We walked off the job back onto the picket line the day after that decision was made, and we've just recently come back to work, and now we're doing rotating strikes. So we're still on strike. Nothing's been resolved. but we're just alternating cities now so we can provide Canadians with the service that they need and desire, but still making a statement and just sort of slowing the process with the rotating strikes.
Well, thank you so much for the update. And we're going to go into those 3 points because I think those are big points. But I guess just to clarify before we get there, there's still no formal agreement reached between management, the government, and the postal workers. This is still very much in limbo.
Correct. No agreement at all.
Okay, so let's go into what these 3 new rules for Canada Post are, because I did hear this in the news, and we're going to start with the first one, which is the elimination of door-to-door delivery. Now, we've talked about this in the past. You brought up previously how not only is it just a nice community thing to have postal workers walking around neighborhoods, that it actually helps in terms of seniors and checking up on seniors and stuff. What is the main argument for keeping postal workers in neighborhoods and walking around and doing this door-to-door delivery?
Yeah, I think that is the main argument, is that we provide a service by going to the door, but there's a service that you can't put a value on, and that is being in the community, being part of the fabric of the community, being there every day, seeing things. We have stories of postal workers, rescuing seniors. They've fallen down in their home and they can't get up. So-and-so hasn't emptied their mailbox in a couple of days at their door. Let's knock on the door and see. I have a carrier that I used to work with in Nanaimo who actually rescued some people out of a burning apartment building. People were sleeping. She knocked on the door, woke them up, and got them out of the building before the fire truck got there. There's all kinds of dogs that go loose on the street. We pick them up. There's a lot of stories of that, but there's also there are seniors that aren't able to walk to a community mailbox, and when they have the delivery to the door, they want that. And we're dealing with we're competing with other businesses out there, other courier companies that are going to the door already with parcel delivery.
Right.
And so it just makes sense in our minds that we keep going to the doors where we already are going. And to be honest, we're really disappointed with the Liberal government, because if you remember in 2015, Stephen Harper was starting the process of eliminating door-to-door, and the Liberals said, vote for us, we're going to save the post office. And I can tell you, in the last election, there are postal workers that voted for the Liberals instead of the Conservatives because they thought that was going to secure their job. And here we are with the Liberals now attacking our public service known as the post office.
Those are a lot of good points there. And I think I really do want to emphasize that this is a public service. And I think a lot of people should view it as this. This is I think that it kind of encirculates the whole debate that we're having around Canada Post, is how much should this be viewed as a private business and how much is this actually just a community organization? And you raise the point of elderly people with mobility issues, of, checking up on these guys. I think that provides, to your point, you can't really put a dollar amount on this.
No.
So how much money, or, I guess you don't have, a spreadsheet in front of you, but if you could ballpark it, how much are they saving by getting rid of door-to-door?
I don't know how much. They did give a breakdown, I think, and don't quote me on this. I think delivery to the door was about $275, and delivery to a box, it was about half.
Okay.
But one of the things no one's talked about is the cost of installing the community mailboxes. And so just a rough estimate that the union's done is going to be about $2 billion. $2 billion to get that up and running. And so, yes, it will save them money in the long run to some degree. It's going to cost a lot of money up front. And this is a corporation that's saying, hey, we're insolvent. We have no money left. So how does this make any sense? Where are they going to get the $2 billion from to install these new boxes? And then there's other costs associated with that as well. Once you eliminate the door-to-door delivery, you're going to take foot carriers off being on foot, and now they're going to have to be put into a vehicle. So there's vehicle costs and all kinds of things associated with that too. So there's a lot of extra costs. It's easy for them to say this is a quick money saver, but they're not giving you all the details. They're not giving you the full picture. They're just giving you a little window.
Right. Okay. And now let's move to your second point, which is the idea that the shutting down of rural post offices. We've seen that in our community in Qualicum Beach. And the argument follows, well, you can just go to PharmaSave. Here in our local town, we have a little, Canada Post kiosk inside the drugstore. What is the kind of the postal perspective on that?
Well, from a postal worker standpoint, I mean, we don't want to see any rural post offices closed down, and there's a lot of reasons for that. The reason for a post office in every community is, like I said before, we are part of the fabric of community. We are a gathering place. The post office is the hub of a lot of small communities, and we don't want to lose that. And that's why the unions put forward all kinds of ideas of how we can add to that. Postal banking, we talked about a little bit last time. That's another example. Banks are pulling out of small communities. This is the perfect opportunity for postal banking to be reinstated and add more services to the post office. It's already a meeting place in the community. It's a short drive for almost every Canadian to go to their post office, but a big urban center with a bank could be an hour or two drive away. And getting back to your question about the privatized retail outlets like the drugstores or whatever they are, those are not Canada Post employees. Those are not postal workers. Those are usually minimum wage paid workers that do not get the proper training. They don't get benefits. They don't get pensions. These are things that postal workers like to fight for. And some people argue, well, why do people need that? Well, we're trying to raise the bar for all workers. We're not trying to lower the bar. People are struggling financially to make ends meet this day and age. The living wage here in BC is over $24 an hour. Most places, most postal outlets pay far less than that. So these are workers that, don't get full-time work, don't get a decent wage, don't get benefits, don't get pension. Yeah, it might save the corporation a little bit of money, but you're losing that know-how that postal workers have, and you're not providing good middle-class jobs.
And the point around training is really something I just want to go back to. So you're saying that these are employees of the drugstore, and they're not going through the same training as a regular Canada Post individual would.
Correct, and I can't speak exactly to what the training procedures are for them,
but it's privatized. Privatized training as opposed to a national.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While we're talking about rural communities, one of the things I haven't seen in the media at all is the Indigenous communities, because there are so many, and I'm sorry, I don't have a number, but most Indigenous communities in Canada are in remote rural areas. And this is going to affect them dramatically. And we are now in the time of reconciliation. We're trying to make things right with our Indigenous peoples. And this, to me, is a huge step backwards. We're going to shut down post offices in small communities because they're not making money. Well, they're not supposed to make money. They're supposed to provide the communities with services that they need and make them feel like they're part of the country. Make them feel included, because we're providing that service for everybody. So everyone can feel like they have what they need. Some communities, especially the remote communities, we deliver medications because drugstores are just too far away. So they order it online and it gets shipped to them. So, these are the kind of things that we need to keep public, and we need people to understand that, your post office is in jeopardy now. We need Canadians to speak up and say, this is not right. A public service isn't supposed to be run like a business. It's not supposed to be for profit. We can certainly make some changes. The union's presented a lot of things. Part of the union's proposal is, turning post offices into community hubs where there's all kinds of services available. The postal banking is part of it, the senior check-in for carriers, but just providing more services. No reason why in a small community in the far north, we couldn't be like a passport office or a driver's license office at the same time. People can drop off their paperwork. I mean, it maybe wouldn't be processed there, but we could be the accepting point for all kinds of different services, and then mail stuff back.
Okay, and then the last point, which I think all this stuff ties in, and I will recap it once we get through the 3 points. But the third point is just slower delivery times. We're moving away from planes and going to trucks. So what is the impact of that decision?
That is my understanding. Them extending the delivery day timelines. The impact of that will be, and it's really unclear how they would establish that, because there's lots of northern communities that aren't even accessible by road, so
Good
they have
point.
to fly in. So I would assume those communities would maybe not be touched at all. But I guess where I'm going with this is we have a service that Canadians love and rely on.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a step towards degrading that service, making it longer for everything to get somewhere. I don't see that as a positive. I see that as a step towards providing a service that people are no longer going to want. And maybe they'll be more willing to pay the extra money for the private courier that's going to charge them 3 or 4 times as much, which opens the door to, well, I think all 3 of these things are opening the door to privatization. And nobody wins in privatization. I just want to touch on one thing that a lot of people don't understand, is that Canada Post is a crown corporation that's run and owned by the government. But the government, is supposed to be run by the people, the Canadians. And we have rules that we follow, like the upper management of Canada Post loves to compare us with all the other courier companies. But the fact of the matter is, there's nobody that does what Canada Post does. We deliver to every address in Canada, no questions asked, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's no other courier company out there that is going to do that, because that's what gets the costs up, right? Big couriers focus on urban areas where they can make the most money. And when you start privatizing, if that's the step they're trying to head towards, now you're going to have for-profit companies running to the places that aren't profitable. So you don't have to be a mathematician to figure out quickly that prices are going to escalate severely. And that's the beautiful thing about Canada Post and the promise that we have to Canadians is it's the same price for a stamp no matter where you're mailing it in Canada, right? It's the same price for everyone, brings equality to every Canadian, and it keeps everyone included. There's an inclusion in that. Now we're going to have, hopefully not, but the direction they're heading is not bringing that equality to Canadians. Once a private company moves in, there's going to be no equality. They're just going to charge whatever they want, and it's going to be a free fall, a race to the bottom. And yeah, we can talk more about that.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're almost arguing that these 3 policies that we've outlined, whether it be the canceling of door-to-door, the shutting down of rural centers, the moving and the changing in how we're actually moving the mail, all of these things are really just pushing towards privatization, having bad impacts for the workers, bad impacts for the customer, because the customer is going to have to pay more and wait longer. Am I hearing you correctly? Is that kind of your line of thinking here?
Well, that's definitely the way it appears. I mean, of course, we're using the finances, and we can talk more about that, but they're using the $10 million a day number is the number that they're using in the media. We're losing $10 million a day.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
company's going to be insolvent very quickly. There's no way we can move forward without making these changes. First of all, the $10 million day is completely false, because the first quarter results were a $100 million loss, and the second quarter results were about $400 million. Now, if you add that up quickly, there's 90 days in a quarter. We should have had a $900 million loss in the first quarter and a $900 million loss in the second quarter, and we're not even close to that. So that number is a pure fabrication. But when you look, what we're asking for is like a real financial audit on where the money has been spent. We're saying that this company has been poorly managed since Doug Ettinger took over 6 years ago, and he's spending money like it's water, but there's no intrinsic values that he's proven. Like, this is what I've changed, and look how much better this is. There just seems to be no accountability and really no transparency to where that money went and what it's been used for and how it's actually made service better for Canadians. And if I can use a quick example, so taxpayers have never funded the Canada Post. It's always been self-sufficient like it's supposed to be as a Crown corporation. But in February, Doug Ettinger said to the government, we have to have a loan to go forward. So the Canadian government loaned Canada Post $1 billion. And a month later, Purolator made a purchase of approximately $1 billion. Now, we know that Canada Post owns 91% of Purolator, supposed to operate as two completely separate entities. Should a Crown corporation own a for-profit company, Purolator, should they own that? And should they be, working together but not? You know what I mean? Like, it seems to me like Purolator is piggybacking off the services of Canada Post. Canada Post is claiming the losses. Meanwhile, Purolator is flourishing. But when you look at the financial statements, the losses that they always give to the media for Canada Post are not actually the losses at the end of the day, because they never factor in the profit that Purolator's made. In other words, last year there was a $800 million loss, but Purolator made several hundred million too. So really the loss was almost, 2/3 of what they were reporting, but that's never the number they give. So if you can own the company, why aren't you showing what good the company is doing? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So essentially you're saying that when we're looking at the finances of Canada Post, it must be viewed in relation to the finances of Purolator because they are intrinsically linked.
Exactly. I mean, they're in the annual report, but that's never the number that they use. It's always just the Canada Post. And like I said, we're the final mile delivery company. So Purolator advertises that they deliver everywhere, but they don't. They send the final mile to Canada Post. So we are delivering the most costly leg of the journey, and they are making tons of profit on the short journeys in the urban areas, and then we're going out to the rural communities that they aren't. So that's really where the money isn't being made, but Canada Post is mandated to do that. And so my proposal to the IIC Commission was Canada Post should maybe charge a surcharge to all the other companies, UPS, FedEx, Purolator, that are using us as the final mile. They should be rewarded for being that last mile carrier and get some kind of value from the other companies so they can do their fair share of chipping in. Does that make sense?
That does, actually, yeah. And another point I do want to bring up that you made in our last episode, and just in the relation to finances, there's been a lot of talk about workers' pay and how much the average postal worker is making, and you guys are asking for a raise, but there hasn't been a lot of conversations or transparency around executive pay. Has that changed in the last 6 months, or are you still very much in the dark on that front?
No, we are still very much in the dark, and that again speaks to my transparency. Like, if this is a public service and a Crown corporation, where is the transparency? Why is the CEO of Canada Post making over $500 million a year?
You mean 500,000, right?
Sorry,
500,000 or 500 million?
Oh, sorry.
I just want to correct the record.
500,000. My apologies.
Yeah, no worries.
So he makes more than our prime minister, but he's in the union's opinion run this company into the ground, and there's no accountability there. Why does he still have a job? A CEO with 2 years of multi-$100 million losses would no longer have a job in any company, any private for-profit company.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to advertise anybody to lose their job or their livelihood, but yeah, there is, especially at the executive level, there's that expression, the buck stops here. And there's definitely some responsibility and accountability that they should be holding. So I'll agree with you on that front. Let's return to this bigger idea of, linking to austerity and this whole idea that, some will argue, and there's a lot of voices within the political spectrum that would say that crown corporations are inherently inefficient, the private sector can do it better, and we shouldn't really be having these crown corporations. What would be your argument for having these publicly funded companies and companies, crown corporations, who are essentially, like you say, we're here to be sustainable, we're here to serve the community, we're not here to make bank?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You're right. A lot of people don't think highly of crown corporations, or I've heard small businesses say, I can't afford to use the other couriers because there's so much more.
Hmm.
And I think what some people don't understand is that in the postal charter, which governs how Canada Post operates, one of the demands is that you deliver to every Canadian, but that you also keep the price reasonable,
Hmm.
right? And the thing is, you see people interviewed on TV in big cities. The post office is outdated. I don't mail letters anymore. Yeah, fair. That's fair. But the thing is that even if you don't use the post office, you're still benefiting from it. And what I mean by that is the Crown Corporation keeps the downward pressure on pricing, right? Because we have to do it at a reasonable cost. The big courier companies don't. And if we lose that public service, that Crown Corporation, then that downward pricing will be lost. And the courier companies will jack their prices up even more. And small businesses and small communities will really suffer because we are really their only option that's affordable. And once they lose that, hey, maybe even Amazon will start charging for delivery because once everybody gets into the game, who knows where it's going to stop.
That's a really
And
good
and
point.
so that's one of the things that worries me about stepping towards, even if these are just mini steps towards privatization, or just letting the post office unravel, if you will. There's a danger to every Canadian, whether you use the post office or not. So one of the things I just wanted to quickly talk about is uh, Dragonfly and Intelcom
Right.
I think synonymous. They're the same company, and they do a lot of work for Amazon. And we just recently found out that the CEO of Dragonfly is actually Melanie Jolie's brother. And
The
so
the
the
minister.
Minister of Industry, that to me is alarming. First of all, she's the Minister of Industry, and I like to think that we are, the delivery industry. But the fact that her brother is somehow profiting off of us losing a lot of Amazon work and going to them. But let's just quickly talk, because I know people love Amazon, but keep this in mind when you're ordering something. Amazon hires, the reason why Amazon is cheaper, they only hire gig workers.
Hmm.
And gig workers drive their own beat up vehicles. They don't have set hours. They don't have pensions. They don't have benefits. They don't have really any working regulations at all. And they make a crap wage. There's a reason why they're cheaper, but also an important fact that I've never heard anybody talk about. They do not go through a security check like postal workers and other delivery drivers
Hmm.
do. So these are just anybody and everybody messing with your parcels, misdelivering them, possibly keeping them, because there's really no repercussions for these people. And that to me is not the direction we want to go. And because Perlator is so busy right now, they have actually hired gig workers too. If you watch any of the videos that our union has posted about picketing their plants, you will see cars, just regular cars driving out of those plants. That's what they're doing now. They are hiring gig workers. That we do not want to see that. That is the wrong direction for everybody. It might save you a little money up front, but in the long run, it's going to cost everybody.
I can echo that too, and that was a point that we brought up in the second interview, I believe. But it's this whole idea of the race to the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Amazon has been notorious with labor abuses and things like this. I think it was early last year that the Quebec plants attempted to unionize and they were
Yep.
promptly shut down.
Yep.
So yeah, and I think the average consumer knows that in order to get things cheap, you're either, exploiting the worker or you're cutting costs or cutting corners in your business. I think most Canadians are waking up to that fact of trying to support local businesses. That's really what I like about the Oceanside area here. We have a lot of mom and pop
Yes.
shops. Please go and shop local if you can. I understand that not everything is available here, but when you have the option, pay a few extra bucks, buy it locally, support your local community. I'll definitely echo that.
Totally. Yeah.
Mhm.
Agreed. And adding to what you're saying about buying locally, when you're buying something online, think about where your money's going to. Would you rather, support the middle class worker, postal worker, and have the money go back to the Canadian economy and Canadian people? Or would you like to line the pockets of Jeff Bezos, who's one of the richest men in the world, who owns Amazon, and that money doesn't stay in Canada? It goes to, into Jeff Bezos' pocket. So, try to think about where you want to spend your money and where that money is going.
100%. And I guess I will also emphasize, there's a lot of private sector people out there and a lot of gig workers. Like it's becoming more and more common. And, I'm a freelancer too. I do all this podcasting on top of doing my actual day-to-day job as well. So I understand that a lot of people fall into this camp. When we're promoting unions and we're asking for workers' rights, this does impact the whole economy, right? And I think that the powers that be are trying to kind of pit us against each other sometimes.
Agreed.
And, if the union gets it, it means you don't. No, we are really fighting for an increase of the minimum wage, more benefits for workers across the board. And when we see Canada Post getting hollowed out like this really just sets a bad precedent for the full industry.
I just saw an article that says the Canadian military loses $160 million a day, but nobody talks about that because the public service isn't supposed to make a profit, right? And I just find it interesting how we're using this whole fear factor that we have to make these cuts to the post office now, or it's going to cost you. That money is going to come out of your pocket. And I think that's what they're counting on, that people are going to go along with it because they're scaring them into that. Whereas we're saying, no, there's an alternative over here.
Mhm.
We're offering different revenue sources. Yes, letter mail is declining, but we have a way of replacing that income stream with something else. And I just don't like that the narrative that they're using in the media, that this is an existential crisis. They use these fancy words to scare the heck out of people.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh, come on. There's always more than one way to slice an apple, right?
Right.
So let's look at it a different way. And that's just not happening. And that's my mission right now as a union member and an activist, is to get some different ideas out there and try to expose the real truths.
The sad reality is, and I'll take it here for a second, Canada Post is not unique in terms of the strike action. We've seen a lot of strikes. I got a buddy down in Victoria who's part of the public service sector that's on the picket line right now. We've seen BCL. We've seen, we can go down the list. Maybe I'll put it on screen here of all the various strikes that have happened in the last 2 years. Do you think this is part of a bigger movement of like government versus worker? What's your read on not only the struggle of within Canada Post, but just unions overall?
Well, I think this is the struggle of the worker, and the union is fighting for the worker. The workers are taking a beating. Grocery prices have gone up about 20% in the last 4 years. Inflation in the last 4 years has been, I think, about 15%. And for us, postal workers, we've been getting 2% raises for the past decade. So, if inflation was 15 in the last 4, then we got an 8% raise. So we already fell behind 7%. And all unions are having the same struggle. But getting back to your question about governments, that's a really good question. I don't like to talk about politics, but I will say this about Prime Minister Carney. I mean, I think the reason why he got elected was the whole elbows up, let's
yeah.
take on Trump. let's build Canada back. And I agree. Let's build Canada back, and we're going to stand up for good paying jobs. Well, here's a perfect example. If they follow through with these cuts that they're proposing to Canada Post, minimum 10,000 jobs out the door, like within the next couple of years, minimum. When I started 33 years ago, there was 70,000 CUPW members. Today, there's less than 55,000. So the attrition has already happened. The routes are getting longer. Yes, mail volumes have declined, but mail volumes have been declining for 19 years. They have not pivoted. Parcel business has exploded, and the numbers that Ettinger and John Hamilton like to use is we've gone from a 62% of the market down to, I think, 24 or something was the last number I heard. That's on them. The market's exploded. Why haven't we tapped into that market? I have literally seen us turn away Amazon trucks and send them back. We have turned away work, and we have handed work to Purolator. Purolator is flourishing. Canada Post is dropping. And I think it's mismanagement. And it's really disheartening to see anyone from the government not standing up for the workers after that's sort of what they campaign on. Elbows up. And, Carney's talking a lot about nation building and building back the economy. Well, I'm sorry, but the economy can't flourish without a great postal service. I mean, we are everywhere in this country. And so with people ordering more online every day, it doesn't make sense to invest more money into Canada Post at the moment. And then, like I say, we have lots of other revenue sources that we can tap into as we go. But it's just really disappointing to see that service cuts would be their first recommendation. And worse yet, during our negotiations, like that is just pouring a lot of gasoline onto the fire.
For sure. And this has been going on, like we said at the top of this, for the past year and even longer. How have you noticed the morale of postal workers throughout this process?
The morale has definitely been declining, and it's frustration, right? Like again, there are members that voted for the Liberal Party thinking that was going to save their hide, if you will. And here we are sort of getting stabbed in the back. It's very disheartening. It's something we might have expected from a conservative leader, but not a Liberal leader. But yeah, no strike should be a year long. Like we have been negotiating for almost 2 years, and our strike, we are just less than a month shy of 1 year of being on strike. It's just too much for people to handle. The uncertainty of what's going to happen next is it's overwhelming for a lot of workers.
I can hear that. What does the public need to know about how their packages are coming in? What would you say to the average person? How does this rotating strike change their day to day?
Yeah, the rotating strike, I know it's still a little bit scary for people, but this is your opportunity to start using the post office again. I don't make the final decision, but I'm going to say, we can't just pack up and go home. We went on strike, and we have to stay on strike until we get a collective agreement. And so we've chosen to do rotating. It has a smaller impact on the members, meaning postal workers, and a much smaller impact on our customers and the public. So use the post office, please. I know they're not going to stand by their service commitments because of the rotating strikes, and they don't know who's going to be out. The service is going to operate. It's just going to take slightly longer, if that makes any sense. But yeah, we want people, you see in the media all the uncertainty. Canada Post keeps talking about the uncertainty. The only uncertainty here is them. When are you going to come to the table and actually give a reasonable offer? But this isn't about the money anymore or benefits or anything. This is about saving the public service, the post office as we know it today. I don't think we should change it.
That seems to be the crux of it too. Like all the media coverage that I've heard around this has been that Canada Post is cooked and it's over, and that we're already going to be pulling the plug on it. And I just wanted to thank you for fighting the good fight, not only for workers, which I'm definitely pro worker and support the work that you do there, but also in just trying to share the benefits of these community organizations. So if you guys haven't checked out part 1 and part 2 of this series, I'll leave links in the description below. Yeah, it's almost been a year since we've met. I hope that when we reconnect in 6 months or down the road, that you have some good news to share with us. And yeah, like I've said this a few times, but I really do appreciate the work that you're doing, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Clinton. I really appreciate that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
And thank you to listeners for listening.
Yes, please do take the opportunity, write your member of parliament, or leave some comments down in the comment box below. We're always willing to hear your guys' thoughts on this stuff. Thank you so much for watching this episode featuring Shane Lorenz, union representative with Cup W, and I will see you guys in the next video. Awesome, man.
All right. Thank you.
Rock and roll, man.
Rock and roll.